Hello, my name is Michael Krzansky. I wanted to introduce you to my Nissan Leaf. It's an all-electric car, 2017 Model S, the base model. I bought it back in December of 2016, and I got it for about $12,500 after the federal tax credit of $7,500 and the state of Connecticut incentive of $3,000. It's got a range of 107 miles, averaging city and highway driving. And also it's rated for 112 miles per gallon. That's the equivalent, the gasoline equivalent for an electric car. So it can get about 112 miles per gallon even though it's not using gasoline. The cost of driving this car per mile is about a third to a quarter of the cost for a similar gasoline internal combustion engine vehicle. The car does better on city driving than highway, meaning you get more range when you're driving in the towns and city streets as opposed to the highway, due to the regenerative braking feature of the Nissan Leaf and other similar electric cars. This is the interior of the Nissan Leaf. It's got many features that you would expect in other similar cars, newer cars. It's got heated seats, which is great for staying warm during the colder seasons. It's got USB port for charging your devices or connecting to the car systems. It's also got Bluetooth functionality for connecting your phone. And there's also a rear view camera in the middle of the dash for backing out. As you can see, the Nissan Leaf is a hatchback vehicle, so it's very convenient for trips to the grocery store or what may have you. So there's a good amount of room in the trunk, but also I can fold the seats down. Now, as you can see, there's quite a bit of space there. I've gotten step ladders, tools, all kinds of groceries, and everything imaginable in the back of the car, so it's very practical for transporting larger items. The Nissan Leaf, unlike a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle, does not have a gas tank, so the way you power the vehicle is by electricity, and there's a charging port. On the remote keychain for the Nissan Leaf is a button that allows you to open up the charging port. You can also open it up from inside the vehicle, so when I hit that button, the charging port opens up, and as you can see inside are two ports for charging the Nissan Leaf. This is your standard charging port on the right, and on the left is what's called a DC fast charge port, and we'll go into that more later in the video. Okay, so now we're going to start our Nissan Leaf car, and we do that by the push button start feature on the Leaf. We just hit the button and the car will start. You can notice there's no engine starting up, no engine noise. It's just quiet. So we're going to now put the vehicle in reverse. There's a shifter that we can put the car in reverse, neutral, drive mode, or B, which is an aggressive braking mode we'll talk more about later. So I'm going to push the joystick and move it forward, and that will put our car in reverse. As you can see or hear, I'm not sure if you can hear this, but there's a beeping sound. The Nissan Leaf makes a beeping sound when going in reverse because the car is so quiet. It's an alert to pedestrians so that they can hear the car coming. Okay, now we're going to go from reverse into drive. So we're going to move the shifter over to the left and back, and you'll see that the orange light indicates we're in drive mode. And we're going to begin driving. One thing you're going to notice about driving the Nissan Leaf and any other electric car is how quiet it is. There's no engine making noise, so it's really a pleasant ride. Anything unlike any gasoline car you've driven. So now if you want to take a look at the dashboard, you're going to see that there's several pieces of information that are very important to us. The first is the 98% that's in the middle of the dashboard screen. That indicates how much charge life we have left in the battery. So we've got 98% because we just charged the car. And if you look over on the right, there's a gauge that says 116 miles. That tells us we've got approximately 116 miles that we can drive before our battery runs out. And that's not exact. That number is a guesstimate. That range can change based upon how we drive, our driving style, weather conditions, how much city driving we're doing, and highway driving. We can generally get more mileage driving in city driving than highway driving due to the regenerative braking feature of the Nissan Leaf. We can also see that there is an Eco button over on the left, or I should say in the center of the dashboard. And the Eco feature tells us we're in Eco mode. And the Eco mode is represented on a button on our steering wheel. So if you look back onto the steering wheel, there's an Eco button. And the Eco is a mode of driving that we can set for the Leaf that kind of throttles back how fast we can start up and drive. So it kind of slows us down a little bit in exchange for getting us some more range out of the vehicle. As you can see, the Nissan Leaf also has cruise control like most other cars, and there are some buttons on the side for controlling the radio, the volume, and Bluetooth. Some other features that we should notice on the dashboard are at the top. There's a series of circles that have white circles inside them, or they can sometimes go to green. And that indicates how much energy is being taken out of the battery or added to the battery. You can see that when I'm hitting the accelerator, those white circles will light up. And the more white circles that light up, the more energy I'm using from the battery. But also, when I am taking my foot off the accelerator, a green circle will light up, or even potentially more than one green circle. That means that I'm in a regenerative mode where I'm actually adding energy to the battery. What is happening is this regenerative braking system is slowing the vehicle down when I take my foot off the accelerator and adding more charge to the battery. If you look also on the left side of the display, the dashboard display, there's a temperature indicator, and that indicates the temperature of the battery. Very low temperatures will cause the battery to get less range, and so will very high temperatures. So if we're in the very bottom part of the blue area or the very top part of the red area, those are not good areas to be in terms of the condition of the battery because of the temperature, the outside temperature. Another part of the display in the dashboard are the series of bars to the far right of the dashboard. These bars indicate how much life is left in the battery. The Nissan Leaf's battery, like all batteries, will wear out over time. And as the battery starts to wear out, these bars will go down. I have not lost any bars yet, so my battery is still in pretty good shape. But eventually, I will have, instead of 12 bars, 11 bars. And those bars will go down. No one really knows how long these Nissan Leaf batteries will last. They will gradually lose, the battery capacity will gradually diminish over time, and the Nissan Leaf will lose range. But this is over a long period of time, and I'm not too worried about that at the present time. As you can see right now, I'm driving the Nissan Leaf in the D mode, the drive mode. There is another mode called the B mode that we can go into, which stands for aggressive braking mode. If I shift the Leaf joystick there, you can see that I'm now in the B mode. The B mode is a more aggressive braking mode, and what that means is if I take my foot off the accelerator, the Leaf will slow down more quickly and regenerate power more quickly to charge the battery. So if I'm going to, for example, come to a stop sign or a red light, I might want to shift the car to the B mode and it will stop more quickly. The Nissan Leaf has an electric heating system as well for those cold days where you want to be warm inside your car. And the thing you need to know about electric vehicles and heating is, unlike an internal combustion engine vehicle, when you turn on the heat with your Nissan Leaf, that is actually going to use some of the energy of the car, and it will bring down the range and how many miles you can drive. So if you can see, right now we have 115 miles left approximately of range according to the Leaf's estimate. However, once I turn on the heat, you're going to see that range number will decrease, and it went down to 97 miles. So the Nissan Leaf is projecting that if we continue to drive with the heat on, we're only going to be able to get 97 miles of range. So that's something else to consider when driving an electric vehicle in the cold weather. When you use the heat, that will bring down the amount of range you're going to get. And you can see if I turn off the heat on the Nissan Leaf, our range goes back up because it's estimating that we'll get now about 114 miles based on the fact that we don't have the heat on. Another thing about driving an electric vehicle is your driving style can affect how much range you can achieve driving your electric vehicle. And what I mean by that is the Nissan Leaf has regenerative braking. That's one thing. So if when you're coming to a stop sign or a stop light, instead of slamming on the brakes, if you come to a slow stop over a period of time, you'll regenerate more power from the regenerative braking system and be able to get more charge into the battery. Also, like an internal combustion engine vehicle, The Leaf does better on slower starts, and so instead of slamming on the accelerator to start moving the car, starting it at a gradual pace is a better way of doing it. Also, the Leaf will do better on the highway at slower speeds, maybe 60 to 65 miles an hour, as opposed to going 80 or 90, just like with an internal combustion engine vehicle. So you'll be able to get better range with your Leaf by not going at extremely high speeds on the highway. Now we're approaching the town municipal center, the town of Southington, where I live, municipal center. That's straight ahead of us, and we're going there because they have a charging station, so we're going to see how that works. The town has been nice enough for some period of time to provide free charging for electric vehicles, as you can see with the EV sign in front of the municipal center. So we're going to go in there and show you how you can charge your vehicle. All right, we've arrived at the Southington, Connecticut Municipal Center, and we're going to see how we're going to charge our car. So I can just hit my push button opener on the vehicle, and we're going to open up the regular charging port, and we're going to go to the charger, and we're going to hit the on button and grab the charging cable. And it's a very simple operation. We pull it out and we can just plug it in right into the port, and it'll make a beep that it's connected, and if you see on the dashboard, lights will start blinking. You may be wondering, well, how do you find these charging stations? And this PlugShare app is a free download you can get for your Android or iPhone, and it will show you the locations of charging stations. For instance, we're located where this blue dot is. We're right at a charging station indicated by the green pinpoint marker there. And if I click on it, it will show me some information, a picture and the address, what type of connectors are at this charging station, and actually some even reviews and comments from people who have used the charging station. So PlugShare is a great app for locating charging stations, and it will work anywhere all over the country. You can see if I scroll out, or if I expand out, there are charging stations, quite a few, all over the state of Connecticut. So, it's quite handy to have that feature. Tons of charging stations. The green ones we would call regular charging stations, and the orange ones are DC fast charge stations that we'll talk about a little bit more later. I should mention also that in the town of Southington, Connecticut, we do have another free charging station at our public library, and another one at an insurance company that is located in town. So the free charging is great. I do most of my charging at home, but I do use the free charging when I can in town, and at other free charging stations across the state. Not all charging stations are free. Some you need to pay for. It's generally very reasonable, and it's still cheaper to drive an electric vehicle even when you're paying for charging than a gasoline vehicle. Another thing I should mention is when driving an electric vehicle, you need to sometimes plan your trips. So if you're going to be taking a long trip that the trip distance is longer than the amount of charge you have, you want to make sure there's a charging station at your destination so you can charge, so you have enough battery capacity to get back to wherever you need to get back to, your home, for example. I took my son to a chess tournament in Northampton, Massachusetts a year ago, and before the trip I just simply went on PlugShare and looked to see if there were any charging stations in that area, and I found out there were. And so I drove my son to the tournament, and I was able to leave my vehicle charging while the tournament was taking place, and had more than enough range to get back after taking advantage of the free charging service they had in Northampton, Massachusetts. So there are basically 3 levels of electric vehicle charging called L1, L2, and L3. L1 is the slowest type of charging, and it's basically a regular electrical outlet that you would have in your home. So here I have an electrical outlet outside. And when you buy a Nissan Leaf, it comes with this charging device with the cable attached to it. And I can just plug that into a regular electrical outlet, and I can go over to my Nissan Leaf, and I can charge this way. So just like I was charging at the municipal center, I can come in, and from a regular electrical outlet, I can plug in, and you can see I can charge my vehicle this way. So that's L1 charging. Another type of charging that you can charge your electric vehicle with is called L2 charging. This is a device called the Juice Box. It's a charging station, a home charging station that I purchased online. And this device will also charge my Nissan Leaf. This device is plugging into a 220 volt electrical outlet that I have in my garage, and this will allow me to charge the car more quickly. But the charging is done basically the same. I take the charging cable that's coming from that juice box device, and I plug it into that same charging port on my Nissan Leaf, and that will begin the charging process. Now, I mentioned there's an L1, an L2, and an L3. So at my home, I have L1, which is the regular electrical outlets, and L2, which is that charging station that I bought online that plugs into that 220 volt outlet I have in my garage. There is also a charging that's called L3, or DC fast charge. And the L3 uses a different port on the front of my Leaf. The DC fast charge is a much quicker form of charging, but the DC fast charging stations are very expensive, so generally people do not have those at home, but they are located in certain charging stations throughout the state. On the back of my Nissan Leaf, you can see a couple of decals I put. Ask me about my Leaf, because I do love to talk about my Leaf. And also on the other side, Infinity MPG, so infinity miles per gallon, because we don't use any gasoline. A couple more things I want to talk about in terms of charging. So on the L1 charging, that's something basically everyone has at their house. And the normal question people ask is, how long does it take to charge a Nissan Leaf? Well, with an L1 charging system, basically a regular electrical outlet, it can take 30 hours or slightly more or less to go from fully discharged to fully charged. So it's a long period of time. If you look at the charging station I bought at my house, I showed you the juice box, that's an L2 charging system that attaches to a 220 volt outlet. That can take about 5 hours to go from fully discharged to fully charged. And you should note that a lot of times when you're charging your vehicle, you're not charging it from a fully discharged state. So it might already have a quarter of a half capacity left. So depending on how much capacity there is, that'll determine how long it'll take to charge. But worst case scenario with the L2 system, about 5 hours. I should mention the charging system I have was not extremely expensive. That juice box I have at home, and it cost me $500, from the juice box company. I ordered it online. And I also, at the time, there was $150, or I should say, I believe it was a 25% federal tax credit. So that further reduced the cost of that home charging system. And as I said, with the L3, that's something that people generally do not have at home. But you can find some of those charging stations in different locations. And the L3 charging, you can go from 0% charge, so a fully discharged battery, to 80% in 30 minutes. So that's a very quick charging system, and that works really well. To get from 0 to 100% takes a lot longer, so you can charge up to that 80% fairly quickly in 30 minutes, but to get to the full 100% takes a lot longer for whatever the reasons are for that. Here's where it gets really good. On the roof there, I've got solar panels. I've got 31 panels altogether. This is my west-facing side of the house, where you can see the bulk of the panels are. I also have some additional panels on the south-facing side of my house. So this electricity, or this energy from the sun, is basically going into my home and serving to charge my vehicle and my other electrical needs at home. So it's really a great way to operate for the environment, and to produce energy at no cost to myself, and to produce no pollution in the process. So electric vehicles have pros and cons. One of the great pros of an electric vehicle is there's no emissions. There's no exhaust system, no muffler. There's no pollution being produced by the car. So that's a good thing. Another great thing about electric vehicles is when that energy that you're using, that electricity to power the car, is coming from solar panels or wind power, something like this, it's really a net, there's no net negative impact on the environment in that situation when the energy being used to run the vehicle is coming from renewable resources. So that can be a really great thing, unlike gas-powered vehicles. Electric vehicles are much cheaper to operate per mile. It's cheaper even when you're paying for the electricity to drive an electric vehicle 1 mile than a gas vehicle. And depending on the circumstance, it's usually 1/3 to 1/4 of the price to drive an electric vehicle per mile compared to a similar gas-powered vehicle. In addition, there's possibility of free charging. Another great thing about electric vehicles is free charging is provided in many locations, and that number of locations is growing on a daily basis. So there's ample opportunity for free charging in many locations near you. Another great thing about electric vehicles is maintenance. There's really no transmission, there's no engine, there's very little things that can go wrong with the Nissan Leaf. You do eventually need to replace your tires. They'll wear out over time like any vehicle, and you'll need to replace the brakes, but even the brakes last much longer because the Nissan Leaf, when you're driving it, a lot of the slowing down you're doing is with the regenerative braking system, which isn't wearing out your rotors and your pads. So your brakes are going to last longer on your electric vehicle. Some of the cons, obviously the range. This car is rated for 107 miles. So you can't drive from Connecticut to Florida without recharging. And, obviously that's something that you need to consider. So you need to consider your lifestyle, where you're going on a daily basis, to see if that amount of range is going to work for what you do. I work in Hartford. I drive there each day from Southington. So I'll drive around town, bring the kids to places they need to be. And generally for me, it's not an issue. I can get where I need to be. And then each night I can just plug in and recharge at home and have a full new 107 miles the next day. Another con, though, of the Nissan Leaf is the battery. The battery will not last forever. It gradually degrades over time and eventually would need to be replaced. And the range diminishes over time. So that's something that is not an exact science of how quickly they degrade and how much time you'll have with them. But that's something that also needs to be considered. But generally, these batteries are going to last a long time. They're rated for at least 10 years. Many are going much longer than that, but that's something to think about. Finally, for the end of our video, we're going to talk about the future of electric vehicles. So what does the future have in store for us? Well, the future definitely has in store for us more charging stations. The number of places you can charge is growing on a daily basis. Many workplaces are implementing charging stations. Many towns, even many Dunkin' Donuts in the state of Connecticut have charging stations. So there's more and more coming, so it's much easier now to find places to charge when you need to charge. Also, electric vehicles are achieving greater ranges. Each new model that comes out is able to drive further. The new Nissan Leaf, the 2018, has a much higher range than the previous ones. The Tesla has a very high range and it's increasing. So that's another thing that the future holds in store is greater distance ranges with your electric vehicle. Also, costs are coming down. Electric vehicle prices are coming down, and that's a trend that will continue. And that's partially related to battery. Battery pricing is coming down. That's allowing the vehicles to be built more cheaply because of the cost of the batteries coming down. Also, battery technology is improving. So as we move forward, batteries are coming out that last longer and can hold more energy in a smaller space. So that's also improving. So I think the future looks really, really bright for electric vehicles, and I hope everyone would consider possibly when they need to purchase their next vehicle considering an electric vehicle. So thank you so much.